My brother took all my savings and tried to pin it on me, so I had him arrested. I'm a 35-year-old man who has always prided myself on working hard for everything I have. Growing up with little, I learned the importance of saving, making sacrifices, and planning for the future. For years, I diligently saved up to buy a house, a place to call my own, free from roommates. But what was supposed to be the realization of my dream turned into a nightmare, all thanks to my older brother. Around 6 months ago, my 38-year-old brother called me in a panic. Our relationship had always been complicated. He's the type of person who expects everything handed to him, while I've always believed in earning things myself. Despite this, I've bailed him out of trouble countless times before. This time, though, he claimed he was about to be evicted and needed $2,000 to avoid homelessness. I hesitated. Over the years, I had lent him money many times, but he rarely paid it back. When he did, it was always a struggle. Still, he sounded desperate, so I gave in. I sent him the money with the understanding that he would repay me within 2 months, promising that this time would be different. I didn't fully trust him, but I figured I could afford to help one last time. Weeks passed, then months. Every time I asked about the money, he dodged the question, offering excuse after excuse. Next week, I promise. I just need more time. I should have known better, but what happened next completely blindsided me. One morning, I checked my savings account. My heart stopped. My balance was zero. Every penny I had saved, all $165,000, was gone. I immediately called the bank, frantic. And that's when they told me something that made my blood run cold. The money had been transferred to another account using my login credentials. It didn't take long to put the pieces together. A few months earlier, my brother had borrowed my laptop, and I must have had my banking information saved on it. He had probably seen it and written it down. The betrayal hit me like a ton of bricks. My own brother, someone I had helped so many times, had stolen everything I worked for. I called him immediately, shaking with anger. "What the hell did you do?" I demanded. He didn't even try to deny it. Instead, he acted like he was the victim. "I had no choice," he said. "You're doing fine. I'm drowning." "You stole from me," I yelled. "That wasn't your money to take." He had the nerve to act offended. "You're my brother. Family is supposed to help each other. You've been hoarding that money while I've been struggling. I thought you'd understand." I hung up before I said something I'd regret. My first instinct was to go to the police, but I hesitated. After all, he was my brother. Did I really want to ruin his life? But the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. He didn't just take a little money, he took everything, and he didn't even apologize. If the roles were reversed, he wouldn't hesitate to throw me under the bus. Why should I protect him? So I did what I had to do. I went to the police and filed a report. They took my statement and I provided everything I had: bank records, texts between my brother and me, and any other evidence that could help. They assured me they would investigate, but I could tell they didn't view it as a priority case. In the meantime, I reached out to a lawyer for advice on recovering my money. The lawyer explained that because my brother used my login credentials, the case wasn't a simple theft, but with enough evidence we could build a strong argument. Weeks went by, and during this time my brother had the audacity to call me repeatedly. One moment he would be screaming at me for going to the police, accusing me of ruining his life. The next, he would be crying and begging me to drop the case. "We're family. Please don't do this," he'd plead. I ignored him. I couldn't trust myself to talk to him without losing my temper. He clearly thought he could guilt me into backing down, but I wasn't going to let him get away with it. A month later, the police called to tell me they had enough evidence to move forward, and they arrested him. He was charged with theft, identity, fraud, and unauthorized access to my financial account. When he found out, he lost it. He showed up at my apartment, pounding on the door, yelling loud enough for the neighbors to hear. I didn't let him in, but I recorded everything on my phone. He screamed about how I was ruining his life and called me every name in the book. "You think you're so perfect, but you're nothing without me," he yelled. Afterward, I filed for a restraining order. I wasn't taking any chances. My brother had crossed every possible line, and I wasn't about to let him intimidate me into dropping the charges. The case dragged on for months, but I remained firm. My brother tried every trick to avoid taking responsibility. At first, he claimed I had given him permission to use the money. When that didn't work, he blamed his financial troubles, saying he was desperate and had no other choice. At one point, he even tried to paint me as the villain, claiming I was trying to destroy him out of spite. His entitlement knew no bounds. He hired an attorney who argued that I was being vindictive and punishing him for being in a tough spot. The fact that he had stolen $65,000 seemed like a minor detail. I sat in court, listening to his lies, astonished at how far he would go to avoid accountability. But I had my own attorney, and we were ready. We presented the evidence, the bank records, the text messages, and even the recording of him screaming outside my apartment. My lawyer pointed out that this wasn't about desperation, it was about entitlement. My brother didn't ask for help. He took what he wanted because he thought he was owed it. The judge agreed. My brother was found guilty on all charges. He was sentenced to 6 months in jail, 3 years of probation, and ordered to pay me back every penny he stole. But even then, he didn't give up. A week after the sentencing, I found out he had called our parents, crying about how I had ruined his life. They called me, begging me to forgive him and drop the restitution order. "He's your brother," my mom said. "Can't you just let it go?" I lost it. "Let it go?" I snapped. "He stole $65,000 from me. He didn't even apologize. He doesn't think he did anything wrong, and now you're asking me to just forget it?" "It's just money," my dad said quietly. "It's not just money," I shot back. "It's my future. He didn't just steal from me. He betrayed me. And the fact that you're defending him makes it worse." They didn't know what to say after that. For the first time, I realized how deeply my brother had manipulated them, convincing them he was the victim. But I wasn't going to let him control me anymore. As satisfying as the guilty verdict was, my brother's entitled antics didn't stop there. About a month after he started serving his sentence, I got a call from one of his friends, someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Apparently, my brother had been complaining to one of his friends about how unfair everything was, and now he had asked this guy to pressure me into dropping the restitution order. "You know, he's family," the friend said over the phone. "You could really help him out. He's been through so much already." I could barely hold back a laugh. "Let me get this straight," I said. "He steals my life savings, lies about it, tries to pin the blame on me, and now I'm supposed to feel sorry for him? No. He needs to face the consequences like an adult." The friend started babbling on about how my brother had learned his lesson and deserved another chance, but I hung up before he could finish. I wasn't going to let anyone guilt me into backing down. My brother had spent his entire life expecting me to bail him out, but this time he was on his own. What really shocked me, though, was how everything started to bring up long-hidden truths about my family. Growing up, my parents were always much more lenient with my brother, making excuses for his behavior, while I was held to a much higher standard. He could slack off, skip chores, and break rules without facing any real consequences, while I was expected to be the responsible one, picking up the slack and making sacrifices. That dynamic didn't magically change when we became adults. My brother spent his 20s bouncing from job to job, racking up debt and leaning on everyone around him for support. My parents covered his bills, lent him money, and even let him move back in several times. But when I needed help, like when I had an unexpected car repair bill and asked for a small loan, they told me I needed to stand on my own 2 feet. For years, I brushed it off, convincing myself it wasn't worth causing drama. But now, I couldn't ignore it anymore. This wasn't just about my brother's theft. It was about the toxic family dynamic that had enabled him to think he could get away with it. A few weeks after his sentencing, I sat down with my parents and laid everything out. "I'm done being the fallback guy," I told them. "I've spent my whole life cleaning up his messes, and it stops now. If you want to keep enabling him, that's your choice, but I'm not going to be part of it." My dad looked uncomfortable, but my mom got defensive. "You're making this bigger than it needs to be," she said. "He's your brother. Family is supposed to stick together." No, I replied firmly. Family is supposed to support each other, not take advantage of each other. If the roles were reversed, would you be telling him to forgive me, or would you be calling me irresponsible and selfish? That shut her up. For the first time, I think they really started to understand how much damage my brother's actions and their enabling had caused. Months later, my life began to return to some semblance of normal. I worked with my attorney to set up a repayment, plan for the money my brother had stolen. It will take years for him to pay it all back, but at least he's being held accountable. Meanwhile, I've started rebuilding my savings. It's slow going, but I'm more determined than ever to achieve my goals. As for my relationship with my brother, it's practically non-existent. He's still bitter about everything and hasn't shown any real remorse. But honestly, that's his problem, not mine. I spent too many years putting his needs before my own, and I'm done letting him drag me down. The experience taught me a hard but valuable lesson. Just because someone is family doesn't mean they're entitled to your trust or forgiveness. Sometimes the best thing you can do is set boundaries and stand your ground, no matter how much it hurts. If you enjoyed reading about how I turned the tables on my entitled brother, hit that subscribe button. I've got plenty more stories to share about family drama, life lessons, and what happens when you finally stand up for yourself. Stay tuned.